My name is Eli Booker. I've been a federal ranger for 16 years, posted mostly throughout the Pacific Northwest. I've done fire lines in July with smoke so thick you couldn't see your own boots. I've helped pull out bodies from ravines in the Cascades after careless hikers took one step too far. I've tracked wolves, tagged elk, relocated cougars, and even once got chased out of a drainage basin by a black bear protecting her cubs. Nothing I've ever dealt with comes close to what I'm about to tell you. I don't care if you believe me. Honestly, I wouldn't have believed myself if I hadn't lived through it. But I'm not telling this for attention. I'm telling it because too many folks who spend time in those woods are starting to say the same thing. Different stories, same signs. It happened just over a year ago. The assignment was simple: a seasonal wildlife survey around the Sican Marsh region, tucked deep in southern Oregon. Dense timberline, old volcanic rock, miles of trailless land. The Forest Service has an old outpost cabin out there. It's been there since the 40s, remote, unpowered. You have to hike in with a pack or come in on horseback. There's no cell reception, no landline. It's the kind of place we use when we need boots on the ground for weeks at a time. I'd done this kind of assignment dozens of times. I even looked forward to it. The silence, the solitude. Just me, a few notebooks, trail cams, and the forest. The first 2 nights were quiet, the third wasn't. I turned in around 9:30, the kind of dead tired you only get when you've hiked off trail all day with a 50-pound pack. I didn't light the lantern, just let a little wax candle flicker near the window. I remember drifting off to the sound of wind moving through the pine, light rain ticking off the roof. Then, a knock. 2, to be exact. Loud. Solid. Right at the front door. I sat straight up. Now listen, when you're 30 miles into a national forest with no marked trails, no nearby camps, no road access, and someone knocks on your door at 3:13 in the morning, it's not just strange. It's impossible. I didn't move. I just sat there in the dark, listening, my ears straining for anything. Footsteps, breathing, leaves crunching. Nothing. I checked my watch. 3:13 a.m. The knock hadn't been timid. It hadn't been panicked like someone lost and desperate. It was calm, purposeful. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. Finally, I stood and took a step toward the window. Didn't turn on a light. Just eased the curtain a sliver to the side. Outside, nothing. No movement. But the trees looked wrong, as if they were holding their breath. And then, just before I let the curtain drop, I saw it. A shape. Not facing me. Not even standing fully upright. It was crouched between 2 lodge poles, maybe 20 feet out. Just far enough that I couldn't make out details. But tall, unnaturally long limbs. And here's the part that stuck with me. It was still. Not like a person trying to stay quiet. No shifting. No breathing. Like a mannequin carved out of the dark. I blinked. It was gone. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Just sat with my back against the far wall, knife in hand, eyes on the door. Morning came. Sunlight washed over everything like nothing had ever happened. I stepped outside, looked for tracks. The ground was wet, soft with pine duff and ash. And sure enough, prints. But not boot prints. Bare. No tread, no socks, no laces, just long, narrow human-like feet. Except they were wrong. Too long. Toes spread almost like a hand. I followed them for maybe 40 yards before they vanished, mid-stride. Just stopped. I tried to rationalize it, maybe a prank, maybe a poacher with no shoes, maybe I was overtired and imagined it all. I told myself that all day. That night, I almost packed out. But I stayed. I don't know why. Pride, maybe? Stupidity? The knock didn't come again that night. But around 2 a.m., I heard something drag across the back wall of the cabin, like claws or bone against old timber. Then, whispering, faint, almost melodic. And I swear to you, it wasn't in English. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just listened. Then it stopped. No footsteps, no fade, just gone. The next morning, I found something hanging from the gutter outside. A feather, twisted into a bundle with animal sinew and bits of charred bark. A warning, or a gift. But either way, it was placed, deliberately. That was the last night I spent in that cabin. I hiked out in one long push, didn't eat, didn't stop, didn't even take the trail. I just moved. I filed a report when I got back to headquarters. No one followed up. No one wanted to. A few months later, a fire swept through that section of forest. The cabin was gone. But that place, that part of the woods, people still avoid it, not because of what they saw, because of what they heard. A knock, right before something starts moving between the trees. Don't let anyone fool you. You can live off-grid, you can cut ties with the world, but you can't live off their land, because they never left it, and they never will. There's more, a lot more. I'm not the only one who's heard it. So, if you think this is just a story, wait until you hear the others. Subscribe to MindFuel, because the next ranger who came through there, they didn't even make it through the second night. I didn't come to that cabin as a ranger, not at first. I came as a man who needed quiet. After 20 years in the city, sirens, deadlines, blinking screens, and people always talking, I reached a point where I couldn't hear myself think. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating right. My blood pressure was through the roof. The divorce didn't help. You get to a certain age and you start wondering what's left of the life you built. And when the noise never stops, even in your own mind, you start thinking crazy things. I didn't want a beach. I didn't want some condo with glass walls and marble counters. I wanted distance. I wanted trees, cold air, somewhere that didn't buzz at night. That's how I found the property. Just under 12 acres, 5 miles outside Bly, Oregon. Not on any major map. The listing had been up for nearly 6 months without a single inquiry. No one wanted it, which made me want it more. The cabin came with no frills. Just a main room, a lean-to storage shed, a cast-iron stove, and an outhouse tucked about 30 yards into the trees. But the moment I stepped onto that land, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Silence. The kind that sinks into your bones. The kind you start to think maybe you don't deserve. Locals told me I was nuts. The real estate agent handed me the keys and said, I'd be gone before the first frost if I were you. Another guy, old-timer, lived in a nearby town called Beatty. He just looked at me and muttered, "Don't stay past the fall equinox." I asked him why. He didn't answer, just shook his head and walked away. I took it as superstition. You hear that kind of stuff all over rural Oregon. Ghost stories, native legends, old settler tales. It comes with the territory. I didn't think about it again. First few weeks were exactly what I needed. I cleaned up the place, patched a few leaks, started chopping my own firewood, brought in canned goods, got a rain catch system going, solar charger for emergencies. I read books again. I wrote in a journal. I sat on the porch and watched owls glide between the trees. At night, I'd light a fire and let the warmth lull me to sleep. I felt human again. The peace was real until it wasn't. It started subtle. I'd hear something knocking, not the cabin this time, but wood on wood, like a branch being hit against a tree, always in sets of 3, sometimes deep in the woods, sometimes closer. I figured woodpeckers at first, but there was no rhythm to it, no searching for bugs, just knock, knock, knock. Then silence. A kind of silence that didn't feel restful anymore. One morning, I found all my firewood moved. Not gone, just arranged, into a perfect spiral. I thought maybe I was sleepwalking. Maybe I did it myself and didn't remember. But the next night, I nailed the shed door shut, just to be sure. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to that same dragging sound on the back wall. I told myself it was branches, wind maybe, but the trees don't grow that close to the cabin. I opened the back door in the morning and saw the woodpile again, this time shaped like a symbol, not a spiral, something older. I won't describe it, not here. But if you've spent enough time studying indigenous markers and protective wards, you'd recognize it. I tried to explain it away. I told myself I was unraveling. Too much quiet after too much noise. Then came the animals, or the lack of them. One morning, I realized I hadn't heard a single bird in 3 days. No jays, no ravens, not even the squirrels. I hiked the ridge trail to the north and saw no tracks. Nothing. Like the woods had been emptied. I found deer sign, but even that looked off. Hooves spaced wide, like the thing had been sprinting. Over and over. Something had spooked it. That's when I started to sleep with the axe next to the cot. When the knocks finally came on my door, I didn't answer. I just listened. And when I looked out the window and saw that tall shape again, standing at the edge of the tree line, almost leaning toward the cabin, head tilted like it was listening to me, that was the moment I remembered the old man's words. Don't stay past the fall equinox. I checked the calendar. I had stayed 2 days too long. It's hard to explain how loud silence can be. Most people don't think about it because true silence doesn't exist in the city. There's always something. Cars in the distance, AC hum, a neighbor walking upstairs. Out there, in the Oregon backcountry, you start to notice what isn't there. And what wasn't there were the birds. I realized it one morning over coffee. I had my cup in hand, steam rising, sun just breaking through the pines, and I stood on the porch, waiting for that usual chorus of jays and nuthatches. Even the crows. But nothing came. Not that day. Not the next. Not for the rest of the week. It was as if something had swept through the forest like a shadow, and every living thing got the same message. Leave. I stopped hearing bugs too. The mosquitoes disappeared. No crickets. Not even the wasps near the shed roof. And with that stillness came something else. The feeling of being watched. I'd go out to collect water and swear I heard movement behind me. Low, fast, darting from trunk to trunk, just outside the edge of my vision. I started locking the door at night. Not that it would matter. That cabin was old pine and rotted nails. If something wanted in, it wouldn't need to knock. But it still did. Every night, at exactly 3:13 a.m., 2 knocks. Always. And then the sound of something stepping away, not walking, not crashing through brush. Just gone. I thought about leaving, every day, but something kept me tethered. Not stubbornness, curiosity, that dangerous kind of curiosity that whispers, if you run now, you'll never understand what's behind the door. Then came the carvings. It was late afternoon. I'd just come back from hiking the southern ridge and noticed a change in the door frame. Symbols, not scratches, not graffiti. These were carefully etched, aged into the wood. I hadn't seen them before. Maybe I'd missed them. Maybe they were revealed as the wood swelled with the autumn moisture. I traced them with my fingers. Sharp lines intersecting in circular forms. One looked almost like an eye, surrounded by peaks. Another was jagged like lightning caught in a box. They weren't in English. They weren't even modern. I took pictures and sent them to a colleague of mine from the service who dabbled in anthropology. Her reply came 2 days later, short and uneasy. "These are protective glyphs, indigenous in origin. You shouldn't be out there alone." That was it. I reread that line a dozen times. You shouldn't be out there alone. I wanted to believe she meant it in a general sense, but something about her tone. She knew more than she let on. That night, the knocks didn't come, but something else did. A sound from above me, the attic. I hadn't been up there since the day I moved in. The hatch above the kitchen table had no ladder, and I had no reason to climb into decades of dust and raccoon droppings. But at 3:13, I heard the creaking. Not like wind shifting the roof. Not like age settling wood. This was weight. Slow. Deliberate. One step. Pause. Another. It circled. I lay still in my cot, knife clutched so tight it shook in my hand. Then silence. I told myself it was an animal. Maybe a raccoon got in somehow. But the next morning I checked the attic hatch. Dust still undisturbed. No prints, just a smell. Wet earth, burnt hair. I didn't sleep after that. Not really. I started hearing things outside, whispering. First it was unintelligible, like wind through leaves. But then words started forming. Words in a language I couldn't place, repeated over and over, each night louder than the last. Sometimes they were right outside the walls. One night I snapped. I screamed into the darkness. "What do you want?" And then, silence. No knock that night. Just silence. Which somehow was worse, because it meant it had heard me. The next morning, I found 3 dead mice on the porch, arranged in a perfect triangle. Their eyes had been removed. Something was responding, not like an animal, not like a person, but something that understood intention, something that could wait. And that attic creaking? It wasn't a one-time event. It returned every night, 3:13 a.m., as if something was pacing, watching me from the ceiling, waiting for me to come up. I never did. I couldn't. Because something inside me knew whatever I found up there wouldn't let me come back down. That part of the cabin didn't belong to me. It never had. I stayed in the main room, and I prayed that the thin wooden boards above my head would keep holding. What happened next? It changed everything. Not just what I thought I knew about the forest, but what I thought I knew about myself. In the next chapter, I'll tell you what I found under the floorboards and what they were feeding. Subscribe to MindFuel. You need to hear this before you ever think about going off-grid again. When you're out in the woods long enough, you learn to stop trusting your eyes. Light bends differently out there. Shadows linger too long. Trees don't move, but you could swear they shift when you're not looking. And yet, something in me still wanted proof. I needed to know I wasn't just unraveling. So I set up a trail cam, just one, facing the tree line in the back where I'd seen the tall figure weeks before. It was an old Reckonix I'd used on a mountain lion survey years earlier. Still worked. Still had a working night vision sensor. I mounted it on a pine just west of the outhouse and pointed it toward the open patch where the woods thinned a little. I figured if anything was coming near the cabin, it would have to pass through that gap. That first night, I left the camera on and barely slept. I lay on my cot, staring at the ceiling, listening for the usual pacing above me. It came, right on schedule, 3:13 a.m. 2 creaks. A pause, then 3 more. Then silence. I didn't move. Didn't breathe too loud. The next morning, I retrieved the camera, plugged it into the old laptop I kept in a waterproof case, scanned through the timestamps. Nothing at first, just swaying branches, wind, a squirrel at dusk. But at 2:47 a.m., a figure, blurred, just inside the frame, standing, not walking, not entering, just there. No animal shape, no clear human outline. It was tall, very tall, and thin. The kind of thin that doesn't make sense with how solid the forest is. It stood perfectly still for 12 frames, about 6 seconds. Then nothing. Gone. No exit movement, no blur, just vanished. I checked every angle, ran it twice. The timestamp didn't lie. It had been there, watching. The worst part? Its head was slightly turned, toward the cabin, toward me. I deleted the clip, not because I didn't believe what I saw, but because I couldn't stomach watching it again. That day, I found something new on the porch, a small pile, arranged carefully. Tiny bones, bird bones mostly, hollow and light. But there were also vertebrae, something rodent-sized. A jaw with tiny teeth picked clean, all laid out in a symbol I didn't recognize. A diamond with a single horizontal line through it. Again, deliberate. Again, not natural. Whatever was doing this wasn't just passing through. It was communicating. It had intent, and it wanted me to see. I didn't move the bones. I left them there that night. And at 3:13 a.m., I woke again to the creaking in the attic. But something had changed. This time I heard 2 distinct sounds, the usual pacing and breathing, low, heavy, right above me. And then something different. A laugh, brief, dry, almost like a cough, but unmistakably a laugh. That sound doesn't leave you. It doesn't matter how many years go by. You hear something like that above your ceiling, something that shouldn't be there, something watching, and you stop being a skeptic. I got up, I grabbed my axe, and I stood under the attic hatch and said nothing. The breathing stopped. For the rest of the night, it stayed silent. But I didn't. I couldn't stop whispering to myself, just short phrases, like prayers or mantras. I don't even remember what I said, just that if I stopped talking, the silence felt like it would swallow me. The next morning, the bones were gone, completely. Not scattered, not dragged off by an animal, gone. And in their place, one feather, black, pierced straight down into the wood of the porch. No breeze, no wind, but it quivered, like something had just been there. Whatever this thing was, it had patience, it had intelligence, and I was no longer alone in that cabin. In the next chapter, I'll tell you what happened when I finally opened the attic. I had to know. Subscribe to MindFuel. You don't want to miss what was waiting above me. There's a cold that doesn't come from outside, the kind that doesn't sting your skin but seeps into your chest, into your bones, and settles there. I started feeling it about 5 weeks in. The days were getting shorter. The wind was colder. The leaves had all fallen and snow dusted the ridges in the early hours. I hadn't seen another human being in 32 days, but I didn't feel alone. The opposite, actually. I felt watched in a way that didn't feel like something looking through the trees. Watched like something inside the cabin. The trail cam hadn't caught anything since that first image. Whatever was out there knew where the blind spots were. I started keeping the fire going constantly. Light helped, not because it kept anything out, but because it made me feel like something inside still belonged to me. Then came the night the power died. I wasn't connected to the grid, but I'd set up a few solar panels, just enough to charge the laptop, run a light bulb for an hour if needed. I remember plugging in the battery and seeing the red flicker. Then it went black. Dead. That night, snow started falling. I sat by the fire, wrapped in the old ranger parka I'd brought up from my old post in Klamath. No radio, no signal, no heat but the flames. Around 2:50 a.m., the fire cracked low. Around 3:13 a.m., the knock came. Same as always. But this time, I stood up. I walked to the door, and I opened it. I don't know why I did. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe I wanted to see its face. Maybe I just wanted to stop pretending I was in control. But when I opened it, there was nothing. No figure, no tracks, just snow, untouched, smooth as glass. And here's the part that broke something in me. The knocking had come from the door, from the wood, 2 solid raps, but there were no prints coming to the porch, no drag marks, no shift in snow weight. I stared at that blank space for what felt like hours, my breath curling into the cold. The forest beyond looked like a painting, dead still, but the moment I shut the door, I felt it, behind me. Not close, not touching, just present. I turned around. Empty room, fire flickering, silence. I tried to laugh, tried to shake it off. That's when I saw it. On the far wall, the back wall, claw marks, deep. 3 vertical gouges about a foot long carved into the old timber just above the baseboard. Fresh. The wood had splintered out, exposed like open wounds. But here's the thing. They were on the inside. Something had marked the wall from within. The blade of my axe nearly slipped from my hand. I went room to room, checked every creak, every corner. The attic hatch was still shut tight, but there was something in the air now, like static, the sense you get right before lightning strikes. I backed into the center of the room and sat on the floor, cross-legged, axe beside me. I stared at those claw marks until the sun came up. I kept telling myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe I'd scratched it and forgotten. Maybe something small got in, marten, badger, raccoon, and somehow reached that high. But that's a lie. I've seen claw marks like that before. Once, working on a missing persons case near the Warm Springs Reservation. A hunter never came home. When we found what was left of his campsite, his tent had those same 3 marks, straight through nylon and canvas. No animal makes marks like that without also leaving a mess. This was clean, precise, a warning. Something was inside the cabin with me that night, and I think it wanted me to know that the door, the walls, the locks, they didn't matter anymore. After that night, I didn't ask if I'd make it out. I asked how, and how much of me would be left when I did. In the next chapter, I'll tell you what happened when I found the second set of footprints. But they weren't mine. Subscribe to MindFuel, because if this ever happened, I've done mountain rescues where the wind would tear skin from your face. I've seen cougars rip through deer carcasses in silence. I've had a man die in my arms after falling 60 feet into a ravine. None of that prepared me for what it feels like to know, absolutely know, that you're no longer in control of your own home. Because that's what the cabin had become now. A shell, a frame around something else, something older, something that didn't care about locks. But I tried anyway. I boarded up the windows, hammered old planks from the shed across the frames, layered with canvas and nails, then pushed the old bookshelf in front of the door. I even sealed the attic hatch with a strip of wire and 4 nails. Every time I drove one in, the head would tremble, just a little, like the boards didn't want to stay. I tried to tell myself it was just the wood shifting, but it wasn't. That night, the attic steps returned, just after 3:13. I woke to the sound of weight above me. But it wasn't the careful, almost animal pacing I'd heard before. It was deliberate, measured, like footsteps, like something human, but far too heavy. It moved from one end of the attic to the other, then stopped directly above me. I couldn't breathe. I knew the hatch was sealed. I had nailed it shut, but I felt it. Whatever was up there was looking down through the floor. I grabbed the only thing I had left, my field recorder, clicked it on, set it on the table. Not because I thought anyone would ever hear it, but because I needed something to bear witness if I didn't make it to morning. I stayed there in the dark, axe across my lap. Fire. Just embers, now. And the footsteps never moved again. Just stood there. Until dawn. When the light crept in, I finally slept. A dreamless hour. Maybe 2. When I woke up, the house was cold. Too cold. I checked the recorder. I don't know why. Habit, maybe. I hit play. I expected silence, maybe the crackle of fire. What I heard instead was a voice. Whispered. Faint, but close. And not mine. It repeated one sentence. Over and over. It's not your home. I froze. Played it back 3 times. Same phrase. Calm. Unemotional. Like a statement of fact. It's not your home. Not angry. Not cruel. Just final. I stood in the center of the cabin, holding the recorder in my hand. And in that moment, it hit me. This wasn't a haunting. This wasn't about me. This thing, this presence, it didn't care what I believed. It wasn't threatening me. It was correcting me. I didn't belong here. This land, this cabin, this space, it was never mine. The idea that you can buy a place, hammer your name into a sign and call it home, that's a myth. Especially out here, especially when the land remembers more than you do. I went outside. Cold. Still snow on the ground. But the sky was gray now, like it hadn't made up its mind whether it wanted to storm again or not. I walked the edge of the woods, didn't say a word. And about 50 yards from the front porch, right past the tree where the trail cam used to be, I saw prints. Not human, not deer, long, wide-spaced, toes pointed out slightly, like something bipedal, but off, like it wasn't built the way we are. The prints circled the cabin once, then again, then stopped, right in front of the back wall, where the claw marks had been, but on the outside now, as if something had come through, then circled back. I followed the tracks as far as I could, but they ended abruptly behind a fallen tree, like it had vanished, not walked off, just gone. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I sat by the fire with the recorder in my hand, and just before the batteries died, I heard it again, whispered, soft, almost like it was being spoken through the walls. It's not your home. And this time, I whispered back. I know. You think locks make you safe. You think walls keep things out. They don't. Not out here. In the next chapter, I'll tell you what happened when I tried to leave, and why the forest wouldn't let me. Subscribe to MindFuel. You need to hear what's waiting past the tree line. After weeks alone, cut off from everything familiar, I knew I needed answers. So I reached out. Found an elder from the local Native American community, someone who knew the land better than any of us ever could. His name was Thomas Red Elk. I met him in a small town just south of Bly, a place where the trees seem to lean closer and the wind carries voices. Thomas was quiet at first. His eyes held centuries of stories, some spoken, many unspoken. When I told him what I was experiencing, he didn't laugh or shake his head. Instead, he said something I'll never forget. You built on their path. That phrase stopped me cold. Who's they? I asked. He looked out toward the forest and said, they don't knock to enter. They knock to warn. I felt a chill deep in my chest. Warn? He nodded slowly. The woods aren't empty. Not really. You are not the first to think this was just a quiet place to heal. But this land remembers. It remembers the old ones, the hungry ones. He told me about a creature, ancient as the forest itself, a being known by many names, but here it was called the Wendigo, not the monster you see in movies. Not just a ghost story to scare children, but a force, a hunger, A shadow that walks between trees, tall and thin, with limbs like broken branches and eyes that burn with cold fire. It's said to hunger for identity, for the soul of the lost and the broken. It's never full. It never stops seeking, and it never knocks to enter your home. It knocks to warn you to leave. But if you don't listen, it comes anyway. Thomas told me that people who build on these paths the Wendigo once roamed freely, often forget the rules. They think they can carve out a life where none should be made. But the land pushes back. The knocks are not just sounds, they're a language, a message wrapped in wood and shadow. And if you don't understand the message, you risk losing more than your home, your very self. I left that meeting with a sense of dread I hadn't felt before. The pieces started to fit together. The silence in the forest, the bones, the footprints, the claw marks inside the walls, the breathing and laughter above the attic, the whispered warnings on the recorder. It wasn't just some random haunting. It was something alive. And it was patient. It was waiting for me to make a choice, leave, or become part of the hunger. I came back to the cabin with that knowledge heavy on my shoulders. The forest had spoken through Thomas, through the knocks, through everything I couldn't yet see. And I understood. This was no longer just my story. It was theirs. The woods, the Wendigo, the warning, and the reckoning to come. Stay with me, because the next chapter will pull you closer to the edge of what's real and what's waiting just beyond the trees. Subscribe to MindFuel. If you think you've heard the last knock, you haven't. You can only live in fear for so long before it stops mattering. The knocks continued every night, always at 3:13, always two of them. But the sound had changed. It wasn't just wood meeting wood anymore. It had weight, like it wasn't announcing itself anymore. It was testing. Testing how close it could get. Testing if I was ready. I hadn't slept in 3 nights. I stopped tending the fire, stopped eating. All I could do was sit there, waiting for it. That night, I made the decision. If it knocked again, I'd answer. I'd open the door, not to confront it, not to challenge it, but because I had to know. The forest had spoken, the land had warned me, and the knocks had become a language I no longer needed translated. At 3:13, I was already at the door. I didn't flinch when I heard it. I reached for the handle, cold metal. I turned it, opened the door, and nothing. Empty trees, thin snow, the wind pressing gently through the pines. My breath hovered in the air, and I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd imagined it all. But then I saw it, across the field, past the fire pit and the old woodpile. A figure, standing motionless, wearing what I was wearing. Same flannel, same parka, same boots, even the same hat. But the face, it wasn't right. It wasn't blank. It was still. Like the expression had been carved in. Its arms were at its sides, its head tilted just slightly to the left. And it was watching me. Just like I'd watched the trees all those nights, hoping to catch a glimpse. Now I was the thing being glimpsed. I didn't move. Neither did it. I stepped outside. My boots crunched in the snow. But the thing across the field didn't react. I raised my hand slowly, and it didn't copy me. It just stared. The longer I looked, the less human it became. Its skin didn't move. Its chest didn't rise. There was no breath. I took one more step, and it vanished. No flash, no blur. Just gone. Like it had never been there at all. I backed into the cabin, shut the door, and slid the bolt shut with trembling fingers. I sat at the table until daylight. When the sun finally came, it didn't feel like salvation. It just made everything that happened feel further away, less believable. I stood stretched my arms, and walked to the bathroom. That's when I saw it. The mirror. It was cracked. A long, thin line ran from the top corner down through the middle, as if something had struck it from the inside. But there were no pieces on the floor, no point of impact. Just that crack, as though the glass had been pressured, like something had tried to get out. I stared at my reflection, and for one terrifying moment, I thought it blinked before I did. I fell back, left the room, shut the door behind me, and I haven't looked in that mirror since. That was the night everything shifted, because after that, I didn't know if I was still me, or if something had finally gotten in, and I just hadn't realized yet. The forest didn't need to tear down the walls. It just needed me to open the door. And I did. In the next chapter, I'll tell you what I saw when the attic finally opened. It wasn't empty. Subscribe to MindFuel, and whatever you do, don't answer when they knock. I don't remember what day it was when I noticed my handwriting had changed. I'd been keeping a journal, just short entries, names of birds I used to hear but didn't anymore, temperatures, dreams. When I flipped back through it, the letters were mine, but the rhythm was wrong. My loops were too narrow. The lowercase g, I always curved it open at the bottom, but now it had a hard hook, and the way the eyes were written, it wasn't me. I stared at those pages for hours, trying to remember if I'd written them half asleep. But the problem went deeper. One afternoon, I looked in the mirror and couldn't recall my full name. First name came fine, but the last, it floated just out of reach. Like a dream, you forget the second you sit up. I told myself I was just tired, malnourished, maybe dehydrated. But that night, I played one of the old audio logs I'd been recording, and the voice that came through the speakers wasn't mine. Not exactly. Same words, same tone. But the cadence was off, like someone imitating me. Someone who had heard me enough times to mimic the shape of what I sounded like, but not the soul underneath it. It was a hollowed version, emptier, like something practicing. The hair stood up on my arms. I shut the laptop and pushed it under the cot. I couldn't stand to hear it again. I left the recorder off the next few nights, but the fear didn't fade. Instead, it grew more specific. What if this thing wasn't just outside? What if it had found another way in? What if I had let it? A few days later, if that word still means anything, I checked the trail cam. I hadn't touched it in weeks. Battery was low, but still holding. I pulled the SD card and opened the files. Mostly snow, trees, nothing. And then 3:13 a.m. There I was, on screen, walking through the field, alone, no coat, just in socks. Expression blank. No flashlight. No direction. I was just moving, from one shadow to the next. I watched myself walk out of frame, and then, 2 minutes later, walk back in, but slower, head tilted, like I was listening to something beside me. The footage froze at the edge of the porch, and there, in the last few seconds, my mouth moved. But there was no sound. I played it again, paused, watched my own lips shape 3 silent words. It's not me. And I don't remember any of it. I sat there, in the center of the cabin, that same growing hum in my ears, and I felt it again. That cold that doesn't come from outside, it comes from underneath. The kind of cold that starts with the loss of memory, then reaches for the rest of you. I tried writing my name again, on a fresh page, but the pen hovered. My hand trembled. I could remember how to write, but not who. I don't know when the switch happened. If it was when I opened the door, or when I saw myself across the field, or maybe it happened slowly. Maybe it's still happening. All I know is this. Something is using me to wear me down, like a copy being printed over and over until the image fades. And when it's light enough, something else gets printed on top. Something older, something hungry. And I think it's almost done. When you lose your name, you lose the right to claim your body. In the next chapter, I'll tell you what I found in the attic and why it was wearing my face. Subscribe to MindFuel. If you're still you, now's the time to make sure it stays that way. It started with the smell, not rot, not mold. It was old, dry, sour dust, like old leather left out in the cold. I'd never gone into the crawl space before. I'd barely even thought about it. The hatch was covered by a rug tucked beneath a warped table leg. I'd seen it, maybe, the day I moved in. But something in me always ignored it, as if my mind couldn't quite settle on why I didn't want to look under there. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't write, couldn't speak. I kept feeling like something was breathing just beneath me, not in the attic, not outside, underneath. So I pulled the rug back, pried open the hatch. A rush of cold air hit me, dense, bitter, stale. I shined my flashlight into the dark. The beam caught layers of cobwebs, old insulation, loose soil, and stone. There was a wall of stone under there, unnatural, cut smooth, buried in the earth directly beneath the center of the cabin. I climbed down, hands pressed against cold earth, knees sunk into the loose dirt. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. Even my own breath felt muffled. Then I saw it, on the face of the stone, etched deeply, words, a phrase carved with something heavy, something rough. Let none sleep where they rest. I reached out, ran my fingers along the grooves, and as I touched it, the air shifted, the cold deepened, the light flickered in my hand. I felt seen, not watched, seen, like something under the surface had opened its eyes. And that's when I noticed the ground wasn't even. I pulled back the loose earth, more stone, a lid, heavy. I didn't want to open it. I had to. It groaned as I shifted it. Beneath it, bones. But not normal, not deer, not human. A partial skeleton twisted and caved inward like something had collapsed in agony. The skull was too long, stretched, like something pulled it forward. And there were too many ribs, at least a dozen more than we're supposed to have. They curled like fingers around a missing organ. I backed up. I don't remember standing. I don't remember climbing out. But I remember the feeling. The crushing weight of discovery. This wasn't a home. It was a lid, a box nailed over something ancient and restless. Something buried before memory and warned about in whispers. This cabin wasn't built on haunted land. It was the warning, a stake in the earth to say, don't forget what sleeps beneath. And I had been sleeping on top of it, alone, laughing to myself, playing music, speaking its name in the dark. I hadn't been living off-grid. I had been trespassing. And the knock? That was the last kindness it could offer. A courtesy, a gesture. And I hadn't listened. The knock was never to get in. It was asking me to leave. In the next chapter, I'll tell you what came after I ignored that inscription, and why I can't remember what happened between dusk and dawn. Subscribe to MindFuel. Some things buried stay quiet until you speak to them. I didn't plan it. That's what I tell myself. That I wasn't already thinking about it when I poured the lamp oil into a bucket. That I wasn't watching the walls more closely than the windows. But when the knocking started coming from inside, I knew. I wasn't just being stalked anymore. I was being inhabited. I'd boarded up every exit, nailed the hatch shut, pushed furniture against every wall, but I kept hearing it, knocks behind the paneling, from inside the cabinets, behind the mirror. And the worst part? It began using voices. Not growls, not whispers. Voices I knew, my father's voice, my sister, even my own. They called to me through the walls, pleading, crying, begging me to open the crawl space again. "You forgot something," my sister's voice said. But she's been gone for 12 years. I started recording again, hoping I'd find proof, some shred of reality to hold on to. But when I played it back, there was no voice, just the sound of myself. Laughing. Low. Controlled. As if something was wearing my skin just beneath the surface. And that's when I made the choice. I wasn't going to die in that cabin, and I wasn't going to let it keep my body like a mask on a hook. I poured the oil across the floorboards, into the crawl space, onto the mattress, and I lit a match. No ceremony, no ritual, just a flame, and the whole place inhaled it like breath. The walls went fast. The smoke rose, thick. The glass cracked in the heat, and I ran. Out the front door, through the snow, into the trees. I didn't look back, but I heard it. Not the fire, not the collapse. Something else, something chasing. It didn't speak. It didn't scream, but I could feel it moving behind me. Silent. Long strides. Branches didn't crack. Snow didn't crunch. But the space behind me changed with each step I took, like the world itself was being bent around it. I ran until my lungs gave out, until the wind tasted like blood, until I collapsed at the base of a frozen stream. And for a long time, nothing happened. Just my breath in the cold, the distant glow of orange between the trees. And then I heard it again. The knock. Once. Not on a wall, not on a door, but against a tree trunk, right beside me, like it was saying, "You're not done." That's when I knew. I hadn't destroyed it. Fire doesn't end something that doesn't begin the way we do. The cabin was never the source. It was the beacon. And now the flame had only fed it. It was free. And I was its last trace of memory. I burned the cabin down, but I couldn't burn what lived beneath it, and now it walks with me. In the final chapter, I'll tell you what it's like to carry something that isn't you, something waiting to step through your eyes. Subscribe to MindFuel. You'll want to know before it starts knocking on your door. I tried to outrun it. Thought maybe if I left the woods, left the fire, the bones, the stone under the crawl space, I could start again. But I was wrong. It didn't die in the fire. That thing, whatever it was, it doesn't stay buried. It follows. First came the silence. Even here, in the city, no birds outside my apartment window. Then came the mirror. I saw something behind my reflection. Then came the recordings. Voices in my sleep that I don't remember speaking. And then, the knock. 2 soft knocks. At exactly 3:13 a.m. Not at my door. Not on the walls. Sometimes it's the window. Sometimes it's the back of my closet. Once, it was from inside my car. I never see anything. But it waits. And I know what it wants. I know what it is now. It's not just a creature. It's a reminder of what I stepped into, of what I invited when I didn't listen, of what I let in when I opened that door. This isn't a haunting. It's a claim. And I hear it still. Every single night at 3:13. I don't run anymore. I just sit there and wait because I know who knocked. And now it knows me too. You think it ends at the cabin. You think it stays in one place, like Horror Honor's property lines. But it doesn't. It moves. Through soil, through stories, through people who carry things home they can't explain. If you thought this was isolated, you haven't walked the Appalachian Trail. You haven't heard what the thru-hikers whisper about around their fires. The stories they only tell after the third night on the ridgelines. about the things that move just off the path, that wear your face, and walk without footsteps. You'll hear all of it. Next week, right here, on MindFuel. Subscribe now, before the trail goes cold.